Colton, Riley, how are you fellas doing? How was your guys' week?
Basketball nerds, hello. I'm doing good. Sleep training my daughter, so that's fun. She's screaming a lot. Less time to think about basketball without getting a headache, but you do what you can, right?
I'm back in the grind of law school, but I'm ready to nerd out on some basketball because sometimes I have to think about something else.
Get that little cognitive break.
Yeah.
If you hear my cat screaming outside my door, or Riley's for that matter, but we apologize, but that's just the way Greg the cat rolls.
Greg wants to be part of the conversation.
Greg's the mascot of the show. We needed a little Greg intro.
For real. He's screaming out there that the Suns, he has a strong opinion on the Phoenix Suns because that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Going to continue our series of Blazers fans reacting to teams throughout the league. Suns seem like a good one to tackle because their roster pretty much configured at this point. They don't have a lot of moves to be made unless Aiton goes out the door. We talked about that last week. That there
Popping
was,
Dimes 20.
yeah, dropping dimes 20 revealed that Portland could be a potential suitor for DeAndre Ayton. So I guess keep an eye on that. But I can't really imagine them changing this lineup without at least giving it a test run. What do you guys think? You think they would trade him before they gave that team a chance to see how they perform?
I think they'll probably at least give it a I agree with you. I think they'll give it a try. I mean, the team on paper looks like it should be pretty formidable. Yeah, and I think that you probably want Aiton to be a piece of that. I mean, as of a couple of years ago, at least, Aiton was seen by a lot of people in the league as a premier center. It seems like he took a little bit of a step back. Maybe there's been some like personnel issues. I don't know. He's still a starting center on a team that doesn't really have a whole lot of extra possessions to go around anyway. So if he can play defensive anchor, and he could really kind of take them over the top. So I think they give it a try.
Yeah, I agree with that too. They do have a lot of depth at the center position, strangely enough, almost well positioned for a trade out to get talent in other positions.
The Eubanks train.
Eubanks, yes, Blazer legend Eubanks. They got Biombo, which not barn burner, but definitely depth there. Bol they signed, which he's kind of a project prospect still, but he's got that size. So if they do decide to make a move, surrounding Aiton, then they do have depth there. That's only if really the only reason I could see them trading Aiton before the season started or even at all is that salary. They're in, regardless of how their roster looks, we can all agree that their salary situation is bad. They're the definition of all in. They're going to be hitting the second apron in a couple of years. So maybe if they're looking to split that Aiton salary into more bite-sized pieces, while the rest of the roster is pretty stacked, I could see it. But you're right. They probably will give it a shot with Aiton and just see how he is recharged with a new coach. And we'll see how it goes. I think playing with Chris Paul for a couple of years would grate on anybody, and I think it has throughout basically everybody who has Chris Paul loves him at the beginning, and then I'm sure Suns fans still like him, but he seems to grate on his teammates after a while. And Monty Williams and Aiton didn't have a lot going well either. So we'll see how it goes early in the season. But if Aiton's kind of still down and not really liking being like the fifth option in that lineup, then we'll see what happens down the road.
Yeah, I mean,
Quick note.
Go
A
ahead.
quick note. I don't see Biombo on their depth chart. I looked at it and
Oh, is he a free agent?
his Wikipedia said last played for the Suns. So
He could
uh,
be a free agent. You're right. I know.
yeah, on ESPN's depth chart they don't have him, and on CBS Sports depth chart they don't have him. They have Aiton with Eubanks as the primary backup, and then Metu, Azubuike, Wainwright, and Kevin Durant is actually on there for a backup center too, as like the sixth option.
You're right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that changes the formula a little bit. Obviously, I mean, and they could get a center back in any kind of an Aiton trade, but with a smaller salary. But yeah, you're right. Obviously, with less bodies there, it makes it even less likely. I do think they'll give it a shot either way to see how the roster forms now. But I just think that there has been chemistry issues with Aiton in the past. But let's talk about the rest of the lineup, because obviously there's a lot to like in terms of a lot of different things. What do you guys think the Suns' biggest weakness is with what they got?
I think by far it's just a matter of usage rate. You know, they have three guys in their starting lineup with Beal, Booker, and Durant that are all in the top 25 of NBA usage rate last season. And that's rare. There's a lot of teams that don't even have one person in the top 25, and they have three. When you add up their usage rate, it's over 90% of the team's possessions have to involve the ball, has to be in one of those three guys' hands, which just kind of goes back to the point of like, what's Aiton even going to do there? You know, I mean, he's not going to be the beneficiary of a whole lot. Maybe he'll get some like put back points, that kind of thing. But I mean, they're not going to run like a lot of pick and rolls with Aiton, I don't think, because the ball just can't be in his hands. There's not enough possessions to go around. So what I see happening is that all three of those guys are probably going to see a drop in their stats. They have to be okay with that. It's going to be interesting to see if they are. But there's also just chemistry questions there too. You know, I mean, not only are the three guys going to be okay having the ball in their hands less, but are they going to be able to play at a high level with the ball in their hands less? Because all three of those guys have had years now, you know, over a decade in some cases, of really just being able to run the team how they want, when they want, with no one second guessing it. And it's been a while since we've seen this work. I have my concerns that we're going to see a Brooklyn situation or, you know, or worse.
Yeah, I don't see a true point guard on the team really anywhere. Looks like they lost Cam Payne too. I don't see him on the depth chart.
Yeah, I think he was traded.
Okay. Yeah, they have Bradley Beal starting at the point guard, Devin Booker at the shooting guard position. You know, all three of those guys that you mentioned, Riley, they're all ball dominant players, as you pointed out, but they're not really point guards either. They're kind of like that James Harden, although I don't even really know if any of those three are as good a passers as Harden, probably not. So, yeah, it will be really interesting to see if they can move the ball at all, or if it's just going to be a taking turns kind of situation. Do you think they make a trade for a point guard? And then what does the lineup look like that if they do? Does Okogie come out and they play kind of smaller with Beal, Booker, and Durant kind of playing those? One of Beal or Booker would probably have to play small forward in that situation.
I mean, you nailed that was going to be my weakness too, is the lack of playmaking. The thing is you can see how they filled in their roster. They're going to be key players in the buyout market if they're successful. If there's a vet point guard midway through the season that gets bought out, or you know, any veteran that is unsigned that's a point guard that just kind of is waiting, they're going to be the prime spot for them. So I think that if it's not working, it's going to be more interesting. I think it is going to be more of a your turn, my turn. Bradley Beal can play make, but obviously he's not a true playmaker. I think it's a fascinating experiment with, you know, all three of their top guys are like, I can score on anyone, put any guy in front of me, I'll score. And, you know, that's tough to stop, especially, you know, in the playoffs, defenses can't gear towards one guy because the other guys can guard, you know, if you double team any one of those guys, somebody's going to be wide open out of those three or eight, and you don't want that. So, going to be interesting if they can get to the playoffs healthy. I think there's some injury concerns if one of their main guys goes down, but I will say this. I know I kind of got off track here, but they filled in their depth pretty well for what they had salary wise. So earlier on in the offseason, after they made their big, Bradley Beal trade, they really had a couple players under contract, and then they went on a spree of signings. Eric Gordon, they got Yuta, they got Damian Lee, but I'm not sure if he was there last
Eubanks
year.
train.
Devin Eubanks, Drew Eubanks. I mean, man, I can't talk. Bol, he's kind of there, but you look down their roster, and those are passable players. Okogie, you mentioned. Okogie's a good player. I don't know. I think that they're going to be tough to stop. Obviously, an injury can derail any team's aspirations, but the playmaking is a serious concern.
So here's my concern is that I agree that I think they need a playmaker on the team. They need to go out and get a playmaker. But then that lineup that Kirby was talking about, point guard is your playmaker most likely, and then you have Booker, Beal, and Durant and Ayton. I just don't see that working. I can't. I have no frame of reference for a team where that has been a successful formula of just throwing three of the best ISO basketball players in the world on the floor and then just hoping you can dream team it against Jokic. I don't see it as very feasible. It doesn't really seem like team basketball. It seems like an exhibition experiment. Now, I think they're going to run into problems. I don't think there's going to be enough possessions to go around. I think there's going to be potentially ego issues. I mean, this has been Booker's team for a long time. Maybe Booker and Ayton could even say it's been their team for a long time. And Durant, he fit in pretty well. But then you bring in another, all-star caliber player who really doesn't do a whole lot unless he has the ball in his hand. I see it as potentially a nightmare.
Here's a question for you, Riley. Do you think that this potential nightmare, do you think it's going to unfold in the regular season, or do you think they'll have a decent regular season and it'll be more of a playoff unraveling? Like, do you think it's going to go well off the bat? Do you think they'll be able to figure something out through the season, or is it going to be when they kind of reach the tougher competition and have to play against the tougher defenses where it's going to go off the rails?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to come a little bit in spurts for them. I think they could very well start out a little bit slow, and everyone will give them the excuse of they need to figure it out. They have to figure out how to play together. It's a lot of ball dominant players. That's a fine excuse, and they'll probably figure it out somewhat as the season goes on. Maybe they will find a playmaker to come in. Maybe one of these guys will have some minor nagging injury that keeps him out for like 6 weeks, and they'll kind of figure some stuff out, with this playmaker. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to be able to slot this guy back in. It'll be fine. And then maybe they will, but I think by the time they get to the playoffs, I don't think they're going to be like first or second in the conference. They'll probably be more like in that 4, 5, 6 area. And they're going to play some good teams, and they're going to get tested. And especially if there's any health issues, I think they could potentially be in trouble on a chemistry basis. But even if there are no health issues, and even if they're at full strength, I think it's too much strength. And they're definitely going to win some games because they're going to have heroes who can do it. But I think that the top teams in the league, the best coached teams, the teams that play team basketball, are going to give them trouble.
Hold up 1 second. It reminds me a little bit of the Brooklyn Nets the last few years, and we all saw how that unfolded. It was, a lot of that could be blamed on Kyrie Irving, and they thankfully, to them, don't have Kyrie Irving on their team, but still it's a lot of kind of getting these hired guns and hoping that they can figure it out after the fact without really considering chemistry and more just considering individual talent.
I mean, you brought up teams that are well coached. I think Frank Vogel, it's going to be interesting to see how he brings the team together. I actually think Frank Vogel's been an underrated coach in the past. He was the head of those Pacers teams. He won a championship with the Lakers, but because of the LeBron pressure press,
lead GM,
jettisons anyone that doesn't win every single year. He got fired kind of quickly. I think that kind of interesting to see how he's been viewed throughout his coaching career, despite a lot of success. Kirby.
What?
Oh, nothing. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does. I think that by the end of his tenure, Monty Williams was really losing the locker room. I think he's a good coach as well, but it was just he was wearing thin on thin ice after all that time with those two back-to-back playoff implosions. He did take him to the finals, and he was 2 wins away from winning, but it was definitely his time to go.
So do you think he's the right man for the job? It's a tough situation to go into where expectations are very high. You got a lot of talent. Chemistry is going to be the problem. He's coming into a locker room that's been a little poisonous the last few years. Do you think he's the right man for the job?
I think they definitely hired a good candidate. We'll see if he's the right guy for the job. He's been known for defense. He's also coached egos in the past. He's coached a team with a lot of like his Pacer team had a lot of charisma. I'm thinking of Lance Stevenson when I say that. Uh, Lance make him dance. He was one of my favorites, but he that whole starting lineup that they had with David West, Roy Hibbert, Paul George, Lance Stevenson, and George Hill, I believe. That starting lineup was viewed as really good, and there was a lot of, I know Paul George was the guy, but it was kind of a lot of ball to go around for that team. And they succeeded. They played really well. The only thing that stopped them was LeBron. And then on the other side, when Frank Vogel was the Lakers coach, he had a lot of egos to deal with there. I mean, big ego. How about that? LeBron is ego no matter how we view it.
Ego number one.
Ego number one. And obviously, in the end, you're right, lay GM. But Anthony Davis just came in. It was a tough time for them, and he rallied them and helped them. So he's been through tough situations with good talent in the past. I think it was a good candidate. We'll see if he can get them all together.
Yeah, and like, don't get me wrong. If I, as a Blazers fan, if I knew that I had Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant coming into this season, I'd have a lot of reason to be excited. So I get why Suns fans are excited about this team. It's a ton of talent. I feel like we've seen more examples of 3 ISO players failing than 3 ISO players succeeding. And it would be fascinating to see it work. Maybe they'll hack the code. Maybe the coaching staff mixed with the supporting cast, they'll figure it out. But I'm seeing both usage issues and potential defense, like on-ball defense issues. And it'll be interesting this season. And that's why we're talking about them today.
I can only really think of one example, correct me if I'm wrong, one example where a super team was able to win it all in their first year, the Boston Celtics in 2007. But since then, really the super team hasn't worked very well as far as you look at like a bunch of hired guns, if you want to look at it that way. Obviously, Miami was able to figure it out after a year or two. I think they won in their second year together and third year.
Well, didn't the Warriors win after they added Kevin Durant?
Yeah, it's a little different though because that team was sort of the main players. The foundation was kind of homegrown. They were drafted at least. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green were all drafted. They obviously then added one of the best players in the world and became a super team after that. But I just look at it a little bit differently than all these sort of pieces kind of coming together from different places. Although I guess Devin Booker and Ayton could be looked at as the foundation of this team. But outside of that, Brooklyn obviously was a disaster. They were looked at as the big time super team the last few years. So yeah, I agree with Riley. I can't think of a lot of times where it's worked out, really exceedingly well, especially in that first year.
True.
Maybe another one of the worst examples, if I was a Suns fan, I'd be hoping to avoid this, is what we've seen happen to the Clippers recently.
Yeah.
You bring together Kawhi and Paul George. That should be a winning team, but they haven't been able to figure it out or stay on the floor. So those are kind of two separate issues. But honestly, even if those guys had both been healthy, I don't know if they could have really, if they would have been contenders right off the bat. You need more. You just need more than ISO talent to win a championship.
So
they're both comparable really quick because they traded their entire future away. The Suns already traded their most of their future for Kevin Durant, and then they got Bradley Beal at a discount because of a no trade clause. Thank you, Damian, for not having a no trade clause. But I mean, they have nothing in the future. That's one of the reasons why they traded. That's why they traded. Why am I blanking on his name? Campaign, just to get some semblance of something back in the future because they have nothing. Their picks are gone, their seconds are gone, their swaps are gone. If this blows up spectacularly, it's going to be bad for them unless they can figure out a way to make a trade on one of these talented players and get some assets back because they are barren in the future. Barren.
Yeah, that sort of points to what we were talking about with DeAndre Ayton. He could be, if they kind of panic, if things don't go as well as they hope they go, they could panic, and he's probably almost certainly the first one that's going to go out the door. So they traded Campaign and basically got a protected 2024 pick back, second round pick. So yeah, they're desperate for trying to salvage some of their future. What do you guys think is the potential sort of floor and ceiling of the team?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the ceiling goes, I mean, I think the expectation has to be championship or bust. You know, if you're a Phoenix fan, if you're
So
the Phoenix front,
you could say the ceiling is championship and the floor is bust.
exactly. That's exactly what it is. The ceiling is championship, which that's what you want your ceiling to be, right? You don't want your ceiling to be anything less than championship, especially if you don't have any future, which is where they are right now, unfortunately. And yeah, the floor is, you know, that they kind of wallow in that like 6-7 spot. I doubt they're going to fall more than that because I mean they're going to win games as long as they stay relatively healthy. They're going to win games. Kevin Durant on his own could probably go out there and win, you know, 37, 40. But yeah, I mean they could definitely wallow, which as we know is about the worst place you can be because that makes it even harder for you to get any kind of future picks. And then they could get knocked out in the first round, second round maybe.
So is that where you kind of see them, if you were to make a prediction, kind of take the sum of that, average it out? You think that that's probably about where they're going to end up?
My prediction would be knocked out in the second round.
Yeah. I think ceiling and health permitted, they're a second seed. I think that if they have the talent, you can't argue that they don't have the talent. That if this all breaks down right and they figure it out, they're up there. They're right there with Denver. I still think Denver's a well-oiled machine and put together enough that they're the one seed until proven otherwise. But they're the second seed at the ceiling. I think their floor, you're right. I don't think they're going to be a play-in team unless catastrophic injury. I think that with a catastrophic injury, yes, because the depth would have to start coming into play, all those minimum players, even if there's some depth there. You know, if like Beal gets injured for half the year and then Booker goes down, you know, something like that comboed together, they could be in for a world of hurt. But you could say that about any team. I think that they won't go lower than the 6th seed, even with health issues. But you're right. I could see them getting knocked out in the first round if they're that low. I'm going to predict that they're going to make the second round and win in a hard fought series. It's up in the air. I don't want to make the prediction, but they will lose in the second round. I'll agree with you, Riley.
That's pretty rough too, because that's where they ended up this last year, was the second round exit. So that's not really much of an, you know, it's literally no improvement by definition. So yeah, that's a tough position to kind of go all in. And most of us think that it's going to be a real tough route for them to get to the conference finals. I guess that's just kind of the way the NBA breaks out right now. It's a very competitive league. And, you know, if they don't get it done this year, Suns fans probably hoping that they'll gel and maybe get a complimentary piece or two within the next couple of years, figure some other things out, and that they'll be right back there competing for, hopefully at least the next 2 or 3 years. They don't have a very long window. Kevin Durant's what, 34? Yeah, 34 years old. Devin Booker's obviously, he's younger. Bradley Beal, though, a veteran. So these guys, they're not going to be around for 10 more years. So they're going to have to figure it out relatively soon, but they do have a little bit of breathing room, I think. I don't necessarily think that you have to panic if you're the Suns leadership and like blow it up or anything like that if it doesn't work out this year.
What about you, Curb? Where do you have them?
I would probably agree with you guys, probably right around that second round exit. I kind of see it not really going much better than it went this year. Obviously they have Bradley Beal. I just don't really know how much that's going to help them when things get really tough. It's like they had scoring and they had play, guys who could go get you a hoop, a lot of talent, but what they seemed to be missing was defense, chemistry, ball movement, floor spacers, guys that could really knock down the catch and shoot shot. So yeah, I don't necessarily see it going a lot better than it went last year. Maybe they'll figure it out throughout the course of the year, though. If they start to gel, things obviously could change a lot. Suns fans, what do you guys think? Your optimism, or you guys a little bit worried too that the whole future's mortgage for this team right now? You guys are all in. That's exciting, but also I'm sure very nerve-wracking. So let us know down in the comments below what you guys think about the team and what your kind of expectations are for next season. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Bye.
Godspeed.